We've scheduled quite a few amazing stories, but I just ask you to just enjoy them, soak them all in. Next, I want to thank all of the women, and many of them are here with us tonight as well, for saying yes to joining us and sharing their stories, and also to our contributing partners that we have 4 that have been so helpful in getting things going and organized. I found this beautiful quote that says, "The best collaborations create something bigger than the sum of what each person can create on their own." So with that, I thank Savant Wealth Management, Founders Over 55 Plus Collective, Next Group, and the Impact Seat Foundation for being just wonderful, like-minded souls to help put this on. So before I introduce our first speaker, I wanted to share a little bit more with you about why we're doing this and about what you will be getting out of this evening. Brené Brown was quoted in her book, Dare to Lead, saying that when we have the courage to walk into our story, we get to write the ending. So tonight, I want you to think about what your story is. Is there something you want to explore or reinvent, try, and do in your third act? Are you ready to make some changes? Are you wondering what's next and how you can make a difference and use your gifts to make an impact in this one wild and precious life of yours? So about, I think, 4 years ago, I started envisioning an idea of a way to shine a spotlight on some of the stories I was starting to learn. As I was building Third Act Quest, I was meeting so many women in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond that were really exciting me about this third act of my own life. So I really wanted to come up with a way to shine a light on them and get those stories out into the world, because I think right now it is really an important and necessary time for us to really try to reframe the way we're all thinking about aging. So what I hope you get out of this evening, each of these stories is quite unique. However, they are all united by some very important threads. And I call them sort of the gifts of our third act that each of these storytellers has received and helped them to find such joy and fulfillment in this time of life. The first is clarity. Each of these stories you'll hear have some version of circling back around and coming home to who they really are and figuring out what brings them the most joy and meaning in their life. And many of them have also just sort of uncovered the passions and desires that may have become buried in midlife. Second is resilience. Like all of us who've spent over 50 years on this planet, we've each faced and navigated our way through some really daunting challenges. Some of them even seemingly insurmountable. But by flexing their resilience muscles, these women have learned and grown from these life disruptions. The third is wonder and curiosity. Each of these stories and each of these women has had a personal quest, asking themselves some tough questions and stepping off the more accepted or expected paths, taking leaps of faith to create new ways of living, loving, working, and serving, creating a life that really fulfills them. The fourth is meaning and purpose. By this, purpose is a big word, but let me just unpack it and simply say they have aligned their gifts with a way to contribute and make a difference in some way, whether it be in their families and their jobs and their cities and towns or in the broader world. And finally, gratitude. The fifth and probably the most core to true happiness and fulfillment. These women feel and practice gratitude for the very basic components of life and the miracle of life itself. So with that, I'll introduce our first guest, Lori Baker Shenna, who will set the tone for this evening with a talk called The Solution Shift, Pivot to Positivity. So I'll tell you just a quick bit about about Lori, and then I know you'll enjoy her talk and this human as much as I have. Lori's professional career reflects a journey, not a destination. She has continually reinvented herself based on 3 basic factors. 1, her passions. 2, her ability and desire to impact others. And 3, her ability to find joy in every day. Each chapter of her life story is a building block to the expertise she brings to her clients, and she's here to share that with us tonight. Thank you, Lori, for being here.
Thank you, Diana. And I am just so excited to be here and to launch this incredible event with you. And the first thing I want to do is thank you, Diana, for all the work you've put in to make this possible. We all know it's a lot of work putting on a conference in live or in Zoom. So thank you for the generous gift of your time. You know, I met Diana through a mutual friend, Lisa Arnold, who introduced me. And the thing that struck me was that we both talked about third acts, because on my website, I talk about my third act and I'm living it. And my first act was I had my own business for 35 years and counting, a marketing and public relations, medical business, communications business. And my second act was being a professor for 25 years in Southern California of marketing and journalism. And so those are my first and second acts, a lot of that overlap. And my third act happened because, which I'll tell you about in a second, my story, but my third act, I became a motivational speaker at age 56. And it has been an amazing journey. And so I'm all about third acts, especially all of us who are in our 50s, 60s, and 70s, because we have so much time to do it. And now we have the permission to do it. So this is a night about storytelling, and we all have our stories. And I have one that is particularly profound for me, and when I share it is profound for others. And it starts in a ER, an emergency room. I was 55 years old and doing, just feeling great and living my life, professor, business, kids growing up. But I was not to be too graphic, but I was vomiting uncontrollably. So I decided, well, I'd better get to the ER. Long story short, I had a CT scan and they found a blockage in my small bowel. So the doctor, they looked at it and said, well, we better get in there and we'll do some emergency surgery. And he thought it might be some scarring or something. None of us were thinking anything. So on the Sunday night, real late in the night, he decided to do the surgery. And in the morning, they had rolled me out at about 5 o'clock Monday morning. I was all by myself. I had no family around me. And the doctor comes in and he says 3 words, really quick. You've got cancer. And I went, okay, thanks. I appreciate that. And he goes, not only do you have cancer, we took out a tumor this big and we don't know what kind of cancer you have. That's all I can tell you. And we won't have the pathology report for 2 days. So, I, as a medical writer, I immediately was able to figure out what was going on with this. And the first thing was that with the stomach tumor, there's a big breadth of what it could be. You could either be dead in 3 weeks, or you could be living, and it's treatable. Well, you guys know the answer to that because it's 9 years later, and I'm 64 and I'm still talking to you. So obviously it wasn't the 3-week one, but I realized that if I had 2 days to think about this, and I thought, you know what? If I have 3 weeks left, I am not going to be a victim and be all upset for 3 weeks. I'm going to make the most of those 3 weeks. I'm going to call people who I love and tell them how much I love them. And I'm going to call people who I don't really love that much and tell them why I don't love them, have some closure, eat some good stuff, hopefully, and really enjoy those 3 weeks because my friends, many people aren't blessed with that. People who die in car accidents, people who die, in violent situations. They don't have those 3 weeks, but I had those 3 weeks. And so that brought me joy no matter what happened. And this story really resonates with me because, 2 days later, they came in and the doctor said, you've got lymphoma. And I knew lymphoma was treatable, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And long story short, I went through treatment and here I am. But it really illustrates my whole philosophy on life, which I call the solution shift. And what the solution shift is that you can't live in your problems. You can't live in the problems. You have to live in your solution. Because when we dwell on our problems and not think about the solution, that drags us down and it makes us a victim. So instead, we need to focus on the solutions. That's the shift, and it's a shift to positivity. So, and when I was sitting there in the hospital room all by myself, I cried for an hour or two, and then I get really bored crying and stuff. I'm not good at crying and feeling sorry for myself. So I just went to the solution. What am I going to do about this? And when I found out it was lymphoma, I figured out where I'm going to get my care and that sort of thing. So I want everyone here that's listening tonight to realize that we have to get away from the problem and we have to start focusing on the solution. And that brings us from the darkness to the light, and it brings us from victim to empowered. So what does this all have to do with tonight? Well, tonight we are going to hear from incredible storytellers who have all looked at their lives and saw a problem or a challenge, found the solution, and acted on it. And so I would love for you, when you're listening to everyone's story tonight, to do a couple of things. One, maybe before in a minute, just figure out what your challenges are right now. What are your problems? What's bringing you down? And then listen to these storytellers and figure out where in their story might your solution be. And then I want you to take notes. I think taking notes, I've done so, I'm a public speaker now, and to really get something out of it, taking notes is really important. And then figuring out what actions you can be taking from those notes. That's very important. I also want to talk about, just real quickly, my 5 things that I believe are a ticket to joy. And I believe in choosing joy every day because positivity moves us forward. Negativity has never moved us forward. But I'm really a practical person, so I believe that there are things that you can do every day to find joy, no matter how much of a challenge this is. And I have to tell you, people say to me, Lori, you're always talking about joy. What are your big challenges? Well, I have to tell you something. I'm wearing pink for a reason tonight. A year ago, I was diagnosed with my second cancer, breast cancer. So again, I heard the words, you've got cancer. And again, I had to say, okay, what's my solution? And again, I got the best care. I brought all my friends close to me. And a year ago, I was bald, and now the hair's coming in. So it works. You can stay joyful no matter what the situation by realizing, first of all, and these are the 5 things that keep you joyful. Number 1, know what you can control and know what you can't control. I can't control my health on a level, I can be preventive, but cancer comes. My mother died of ovarian cancer. My sister died of breast cancer. So there's a lot I don't have control over, but I do have control over how I react to that. And also, I want you all in our age group and what we're doing to not worry about what other people are thinking of us. We have no control over other people and how they view us. We only have control over ourselves. So let's remember that It's time to stop worrying about what other people think about us. The most important person to think about us is you, all right? Which goes to my second incredibly important point. We must learn to love ourselves. We have to stop beating up on ourselves. We have to stop being negative to ourselves. And when we hear ourselves beating ourselves up, we have to flip that script and think about how we can remain positive and what can we say. So, for example, if I made a mistake, let's say cooking, instead of saying, "Oh my God, Laura, you're so stupid. You're the worst cook. You should never do this again." You need to say to yourself, "You know what? Objectively, I made this mistake and I'm not going to make that again because I have learned." You can be self-analytical without being self-critical. And this is the thing we need not only to teach ourselves, but teach our daughters and granddaughters, of course, and our sons as well. Number 3, we have to give up the myth of perfectionism because it keeps us stuck and doesn't allow us to move forward. Perfectionism, in my opinion, is boring. I wouldn't want to go out with a friend who's got the perfect life, the perfect spouse, the perfect job, the perfect house, the perfect car. I would walk out. Life is messy. Life needs to be messy. The only 2 people in my life that I believe need to be perfect are my pilot and my surgeon. Otherwise, the rest of us we have the chance to really just progress, not perfection. And if we can give that up, and that also goes along with what people think of us, we're going to be okay. The 4th thing, and this is a favorite amongst all my audiences, we have to stop saying as women, "I'm sorry." Just stop saying, "I'm sorry." We apologize too much. It's in our language. It keeps us from being empowered. And I want you to hear yourself say it. People say it all the time. So instead of saying, "I'm sorry, I'm late," you say, "Thank you for your patience." The only time you need to say, "I'm sorry," is maybe if you murder someone. And even then, who knows? That might be justified. But sorry needs to be saved for those incidents that really, really, really deserve it. So stop saying, "I'm sorry," and start being empowered and start embracing that power. And finally, it's really important to choose joy every day. We wake up in the morning and we have 2 choices. We can either have a crappy day or we can say, "I'm going to have a great day." And even in my darkest days of my chemo and all the other things in my double mastectomy and all that stuff goes wrong, I woke up every morning and say, "You know what? No matter what today brings, I'm going to try to find some joy." And that uplifts you. That and gratitude. If you can I'm grateful to be able to talk to you today. I'm grateful for everything that has happened in my life, good and bad. If you can embrace that and find joy and make that decision, you're going to be fine. Finally, I want to say that I was telling Diana this. When I turned 60, I was absolutely giddy. I'm 64 now. So I had breast cancer when I was 63. But when I was 60, I woke up and I was giddy because I know that the older that we get, the more invisible we become in society. And I thought, my goodness, I'm invisible now. I can really fly because no one's going to give a crap about what I do. And I'll tell you, it has been liberating. I am more empowered on stage. I become an incredible coach, all that because my age liberated me. So I just want to say that. I want to wish you a fantastic, fantastic event with all of us here and to celebrate all of you. And I wish you just a lot of joy. Thank you so much.
Oh my goodness, my friend. I have to say, one of the things that I want to add to the list of ways of staying positive is believing in something that may be a little too woo-woo for some, but is synchronicity. Because I think I've met each and every one of you through some beautiful confluence of events and happenstance that were meant to be, at least as far as I'm concerned, and that you're here tonight. And I'm so happy to see you all. And thank you, Lori, for setting us up on a very positive level. For those of you that weren't in the back room as we were getting started, we had a potentially fatal problem with Zoom that we solved, and having Lori just say, pivot to the positive, we were all sort of laughing our way through the nervousness. So thank you so much, Lori. I am next going to, well, one of the things I also want to do is let you all know that I will be sharing follow-up emails from each of the storytellers with, and the event site has links to their bios and other things so you can learn about them and learn a little bit more about them. But for now, I'm just going to move on and introduce our next amazing human. And her name is Melissa Davey. So if you can pop Melissa up here on the screen with me. Melissa, one of the things that I will share about each of the storytellers is the answer to a question I ask each of them, which is, if you were asked to create a bumper sticker that embodied or shared your philosophy about your third act, what would it be? So I'm going to share that about each of the women I introduced, and you'll soon learn why Melissa's bumper sticker would read, "Live a great story." Currently heading into her 72nd year, you will hear in her story that she left a career as a senior exec at age 65 to become a filmmaker. Her first film that we're going to show a trailer of in just a second is called Beyond 60. It's currently in distribution, and she's in the process of editing her second and next film called Climbing into Life. We'll get to see both trailers tonight. She's a wife, a mother to 2 grown children, and a grandmother to 3 boys. She loves to travel and experience new cultures, foods, and traditions. And you can see which fuels her filmmaking career. She is curious about everything and loves film and storytelling. So hello, Melissa. It's so wonderful to see you. Do you want us to play the trailer for Beyond 60 first?
Yeah, why don't we just jump into that? And then,
Okay.
it's very short, and then we'll start chatting.
Being an older woman shouldn't erase the experiences and contributions we've made, but rather make for better storytelling. We're not retiring, we're reinventing. I'm on a mission to find and tell these stories.
I am very lucky that I graduated from college at a moment when doors were opening for women. When I talk to young women, they have no idea that there was a time women couldn't get credit cards in their names.
I don't know. Resilience. It's part of being not willing to give up the ghost and just stay in a corner and be what people think you should be.
And some of these elderly ladies that are 84 and in their early 80s, they inspire me to keep moving.
So what will happen to me is unknown, but I'm very open to the unknown.
Okay, I am back, and I apologize that that rendition wasn't great. It doesn't transfer well over Zoom or anything like Zoom. So, but you get a gist for what it is that I'm doing. And now, how did I get there? That's my story. I am, Diana was great to say that I was entering into my 72nd year. Well, I'm already there. I think when I wrote that, I wasn't 72 yet, and I am now. And what a ride it's been. What a great ride. And in my third act as a filmmaker, sometimes I look in the mirror and I'm just a little bit blown away. I started out in nonprofits and was in legal services for, 12 plus years, representing individuals before the Social Security Administration, before I was recruited to Gen X, a national managed care company, and went in and built a Social Security disability national program for them and stayed there for more than 2 decades. So those were my first and second acts. And then what the heck led me to becoming a filmmaker? Well, I'll take you back in time to maybe set this up, because there was never a plan in my life to become a filmmaker, not until I did it. So let's just see if there's some kind of thread there that led me to where I'm sitting today. And I'll take you back to the time I was about 9. And the reason that I'm doing that is because at the point that I was 9, I had already moved with my family 6 times, different states, different towns, cities. And I would move again before I was out of high school, another 6 times. So, that was part of my life, constantly moving, changing, and being introduced to new environments, new people, new opportunities. But around 9, there was something in me at that point. I was a very curious person, even as a little person. I was extremely curious about who are my neighbors and who are these kids and how will I meet them and what are they going to tell me? And I can't wait to hear their story. So I've always been connected and interested in listening to stories. And when I was 9, I remember we moved to Fairfield, Connecticut, and I remember that day with the moving van there, and I walked down the street and started knocking on doors saying, "Hi, I'm Melissa, and I'm new here, and do you have any kids that I could play with?" So in that, I wasn't shy. I think I had learned to get comfortable with moving. So I was extremely interested in finding these kids and hearing their story. And this just happened to me over and over and over again in my life as I moved forward. There was nothing very planned in my life, and there was nothing, honestly, all that stable when you look back at it. But what it did was offer me all these opportunities to become interested in other people, other cultures, other food, whatever it might be. And so, my circuitous route that I was on, I stayed on. I got married young, I had children very young, I got divorced young, eventually much later remarried, happily, thankfully. But, it was always my curiosity that was pushing me forward and challenging me to look in the mirror and say, who are you and what are you doing and why are you doing this? And maybe you should take a different route. So I was never afraid to do that. And back, in my Fairfield, Connecticut days, I went to the movies a lot. The movies took me places. It took me, on these fantasy rides that I loved. Same with books. But I was able to go to the movies on my own when I was 9, because back in the 50s, the parents didn't seem concerned about, men lurking in the shadows, ready to take children away. So, my friends and I would go to the 35-cent matinee, and I was mesmerized by how these films were made. And that always stuck with me. I've always loved to be in a theater with other people watching a film, but I never, ever, ever considered, becoming a filmmaker. So I did my nonprofit. I had my little family. I got recruited into the for-profit world, which was the train that I was on at that point was even faster than the nonprofit train, as you can imagine, especially if you've done both. And, my life just became this long, fast, exciting, challenging time. And then one day, I realized by looking at the clock at work that, oh, gee, I've been here more than 2 decades. I've done a great job. Things are going really well. But guess what? I was 65. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh my God, is this it? Is this all I'm going to do? I'm going to stay on this train. And so I kept thinking, oh. So I started doing an inventory of all the things that I'd fantasized about, and film ended up on the fantasy list. But again, that little voice that all, young girls and women hear is, you're not trained to do that. There's no way you could do that. You don't have the experience. So, but I made the list, and then there were some aha moments. One being the CEO coming to me and saying, we're being bought out again by private equity. And at that point I was a VP, and I was on the executive team, and I'd already been, in that rodeo a few times. So I understood that I would need to make another commitment for 5 more years at least. And I thought, wow, I'll be 70 then. And do I really want to do this? Then I ended up a day on the set with M. Night Shyamalan. And that's a long story that I don't have time to tell you. But he said a few words to me at lunch that day. And he said, "What do you do for work?" And I explained what I did. And he looked kind of glazed over and he said, "What do you really want to do?" And I immediately said, "Oh, I want your job, big director. Or, look, this is a blast." And he said to me, he looked right at me and said, "You better hurry up." Well, it hit me like a ton of bricks because I'd been playing with the idea of this list of things I hadn't done. And he was right. I was already 65. So I went home that night and told my husband that I was going to quit my job the next day. And when I gave a long notice and stayed there a long time in order to, make sure that I left the business that I created for them in better shape than it was when I started it, as well as figure out, now, how am I going to make this film and what am I going to do? And that's how Beyond 60 was created. Beyond 60 is about women over the age of 60 showing their continued relevance as they age, their resilience, their stories. And that's my passion, stories. I want to help other women tell their stories because they're important. And as Lori said earlier, they shouldn't be invisible. There's no way, because they're at their peak and they have a lot to offer. So that's where I'm sitting today as a filmmaker, ready to finish editing my second film called Climbing into Life. And I would love to end this showing a little trailer for Climbing into Life and then have chats with all of you about any questions that you might have.
So how did I get here? It's a long story.
One big smile.
I took my daughter to a marathon and I watched everybody coming in from the finish line. I was thinking, wow, they look so happy. I want to know what that feels like.
When I realized that the whole world was looking at this young white male, Alex, climbing this wall, and that his mother spoke 7 languages, played at least 3 instruments, was a painter artist, had lived in Japan, and was a prolific writer, I thought, why isn't society naturally looking at this remarkable human being?
I'm very pleasantly surprised by what Mom has done in the second half of her life.
I decided that, okay, well, maybe this is my chance to have a life. You can learn so much from copying the masters in whatever endeavor. 3 weeks, I think, after Alex did his incredible free solo climb of El Capitan, he led me up El Cap. Climbing is 100% you against you and nobody else. Only you know what you're capable of. And you'll never find out if you don't try it.
For those of you who may have recognized Alex, who was in the film Free Solo, is her son. So what a great thing that he's a part of the film as well. So I want to ask you just a couple of questions, and I want to open up the Q&A for everyone who's in the Zoom room. For those of you who are watching on live stream, I just drink this all in because the Q&A will be really helpful and interesting for everyone. But for those of you in the Zoom room, if you have questions specifically, I want to kick things off because I just would love to know, in your film Beyond 60, how did you identify and then end up choosing the women that you wanted to feature?
Yeah, well, I featured 9 women from all across the country, and I found them in that last year that I was at work. I had the luxury of finding a production company and spending time trying to find these women. So I was Google searching, looking for, articles about older women and stories about older women, asking everybody I knew if they knew of somebody. And it was that I was cold calling people. And I ended up talking with between 80 and 100 people during that year, and got it down to these 9 people. And one thing I want to say about women supporting women, they all knew that I was a brand new filmmaker. They knew that this was a crapshoot that they were heading into. And when I asked each one of them, not one hesitated to say, yes, I want to be in your film. Yes. That, which blew me away. And that's why I talked to so many people, because I figured a lot of them would say no, So these women trust me with their stories, and they're not part of editing, and it is an amazing process.
Wow, it's beautiful. So I want to open up to anyone here. If you have a question, either type it in the chat and I'll read it, or if you want to raise your hand, Elizabeth will spotlight you to chat with Melissa.
So no, this thing is in front of me. Okay. So Melissa, so I think getting a production company, I mean, it's one thing to have an idea and be enthusiastic and have women, agree, but the production company is ultimately what makes it happen, right? Facilities, money, support, the whole thing. So how did that all?
Well, the money, I didn't hire a production company that funded this. I went and found a production company that could do camera, lights, sound, to come with me to, make this happen. So it was financed by me, and with a very generous, later on, a very generous sponsorship from United Healthcare, which was, again, another one of those random telling my story to somebody from UHC and having them say, oh, well, I think we might have something in common here. Let's help you out. So they did. But does that answer your question?
It does.
How I found the production company was just.
No. But then also you had a distributor too, right?
The distributor came much later. Yes. So I hired the production company to help me actually, visually put this on film. And then after the film was out, we spent a year at film festivals. And we did 8 film festivals here and in Canada, United States and Canada. And then I started looking for a distributor, and COVID kind of shut that for a year. It was really a mess. And then I found one in early 2021, and the film was released April 2021. Yeah. Now, what happens with the second one, I don't know. I'm hoping that there's some cachet there. Now that I actually have one that won some awards and it's out there for people to see, I'm hoping that distribution will be easier this time.
So we have 2 other questions. Stella sounds like she is a 60-something looking to create her own film. So do you have a question for Melissa?
Yes. Hi, Melissa.
Hi.
Thanks so much for sharing about your movies. I have a full-length fiction movie script about 3 women entrepreneurs in their 60s.
Ooh.
How would you advise proceeding with something like that? It's a little different from what you're doing, but I wondered if you might have some thoughts.
Yeah. And did you write the script? Is that what you have?
Yes, I wrote a novel, and then I wrote the script version of the novel.
Well, there are production companies that are looking to back scripts. So, I'd be willing to, where are you located?
North Carolina.
North Carolina. Okay. I'd be willing to check with the production companies that I am in cahoots with. One in DC, one in Philly, one in New York, to see if they're interested, and or if they know of somebody down toward you that may be looking. There are people that are actually out there looking for scripts to film and put together.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, get in touch with me.
I will. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, Ju, who is another filmmaker, we have time for you to ask a quick question because
Yes.
it's time to move on, but I
Thank
definitely
you.
wanted to hear from you.
Thank you, Diana, and thank you, Melissa. I love your story. I echo a lot of what you said. I'll be speaking tomorrow, first speaker tomorrow. So my question is, as a fellow filmmaker, also someone who was an accidental documentary filmmaker, how did you learn the craft of storytelling visually with making a film? That's not an easy task. So I'm really interested in your process, and then I'll probably share some of mine tomorrow.
I think that the process of putting the story together so that it's logical and makes sense is a process that I was involved in when I was young. It's also a process when I was in the nonprofit. I was putting together a complete story for the judge. When I was in business in the for-profit world, I was putting together stories logically to tell to the customer who was buying our services. So it's always been kind of a logical process for me. And it's usually very clear when it's not the way it should be. And that's where we are right now with the editors. You know what it's like. We're flipping. No, let's put that over here. But to me, it's a pretty comfortable process. And I was surprised at that because I wasn't trained to be a filmmaker. But I find that filmmaking stories are stories. So if you're logical in your process for telling a story, then you'll probably find it fairly simple. And you have to have a good editor.
See the business link for sure, because that was also my background. But in visual storytelling of the movie, I realized that the emotional aspect is so powerful because people go see movies because they want to be moved, they want to be touched and inspired. So so it's not only logic, but also like emotions and character revealing moments.
You have to connect.
How it unfolds. Yes.
I can't wait to hear your story.
Thanks for
tomorrow.
sharing.
Thank you, Diana. I so appreciate it.
Absolutely. Let me just mention that some of the storytellers have been generously offering a gift for people who are listening in. And I'm going to be following up in email follow-ups with you guys. But basically, Melissa is offering not only a DVD of her Beyond 60 film, but she does these really cool 1 hour Zoom Q&A watch parties. So what we're going to do is to say, if you email her directly, and we'll get her email address to you in the follow-ups, is she will place all the names in a hat and choose someone who's interested in having a watch party. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So our next storyteller is Barbara McBee. Now, her third act bumper sticker, and you love this, is never give in. She's a former news director and reporter and is now telling her own stories. She's a native Californian, now living in Chicago. She's a storyteller and author whose adventures have included Filet of Solo, This Much Is True, the Goodman Theater Play Build, Intergens, and Gen Narrations. You can imagine how interesting that would be. She thinks of herself as a global citizen and an SGI Nichiren practitioner. She is at home everywhere. She's also the author of 2 books, The Art of Making Stone Love Stone, and From a Place to Behold, a Goodman Theater Stories collection. So Barbara, thank you for being here tonight to share your story.
Thank you for having me. And Lori, I hope that my story, 18th in Pink, is actual proof of exactly what you said, finding joy, being fearless, and moving forward regardless. And Melissa, I too have lived all over the world. I figured out one day, it never dawned on me, 4 high schools. I'm the daughter of an Army colonel. And how I met my dearest friends in high school in Seoul, Korea, who are still friends 52 years later. So this story is about physically being completely devastated that I was not going to live the dream that I thought I wanted to dream, but ultimately this health challenge led me elsewhere. And in my 60s, I picked up a pen and stepped out of my comfort zone. So this is called, and it's a dramatic reading, I'll not just be reading from the page, it's called 18 and Pink. She'll stop. She sees me, right? I'll step out a little. She sees me. I'm clutching my house key hungover, pausing before I cross the street. The hazy morning sun lit up my roommates having coffee in the Victorian window seat. We waved. A pink Pinto was hurling down 18th and Hartford Street. I stepped out from between parked cars. The small pink car continued charging forward. Who has pink cars? Mary Kay. She sees me, right? I'm certain, but the small pink Pinto nearly faded into the sunrise glow. I stared in disbelief. Turn your back, I said. She's not stopping, and I'm frozen in the street. Let her hit your ass. Maybe that'll soften the blow. I turned in slow motion. I heard bones snap as the grill of the pink machine shoved me up and flung me down the block. In slow motion, I bounced, hitting the blacktop twice. I bounced, flying through the air like a rag doll. I rolled and I rolled and I rolled, and I came to a stop, still clutching my house key in tight grip. My insurance! Pink Pinto shrieks. How am I going to afford insurance? I just want to walk, lady. I start to listen, listening deeply to my body. My sacrum is throbbing, blaring, stop and go, stop and go. My legs were numb. As I listened to it pound, I knew it was broken. I couldn't move. The ambulance took me to the hospital. I mulled the ceiling and listened to my physicalities. Look, I balled up my fist at the nurse's tone. In a short time, your organs may explode, you may have internal bleeding or collapse, and chances are you'll never walk again and you can forget about dancing. I'm going home. Screw her and her negative attitude. Nurse wrote a huge refused treatment on my chart and threw the file on my stomach. My bed was on the floor. If I tucked in my stomach, I could forward roll out of bed and forward roll back in. I could crawl to the bathroom and forward roll off the toilet, crawling on my hands and knees back to bed. For 3 months, this is how I traveled around my flat. I placed new burgundy 5-inch stiletto boots at the foot of my bed. I'm going to wear those and I'm going to walk in them, period. Roommate was a flight attendant. Her mates sent home bits of their private stashes. One put you to sleep, one woke you up, one kept you awake. My pill bottle was a colorful melange of I have no idea what I was taking. I refused treatment, remember? So I had no pain protocol except my own devices. I was a trained ballerina whose favorite and brutal maestra was formerly of the Ballet Russe who danced with Nijinsky. I'll show her. First, we will walk. I moved across the wooden floors on my hands and knees. My roommates, traumatized, followed my insistence and left me alone. Now I do this on my own. I became adept at tucking my stomach in and rolling off the toilet every day, bed exercises and pain so horrific I was often speechless. It appears babies are pulling up and bouncing about and suddenly running everywhere. They work out when we aren't looking. They are practicing. That was me, learning all over again. 3 months later, I stared at those stilettos. It was time. I climbed down sloping Castro Street in my 5-inch heel boots into the corner bar and ordered a drink. I started to dance. Oh, no, 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 no. No dancing. We don't have a cabaret license. I explained how I had crawled and was newly walking, a 21-year-old toddler. Girl, that is all you had to say. Together, we shut the blinds and hung out the closed sign. I danced on the tables. I danced from wall to wall. As the bartender applauded, I danced. And I climbed the hill home in my burgundy stiletto boots. I ran into Madame Ivanovska in a wheelchair, dressed elegantly in black, regal, and stiff. In her presence, I took an immediate, perfectly turned out fist position. I curtsied instinctively. She glared. "You're not dancing." Well, I was in a car accident. She sniffed and stared me up and down. "Too bad. You would have made a great dancer." Her daughter wheeled her off. I was dismissed with a wave of her graceful hand, but I won. I absolutely won the praise of the maestra. I won. I could officially hang up my toe shoes, no regrets. From my own business to writing for magazines and newspapers to news director and bureau chief, I edited and told the stories of others. I rediscovered my age-old dream of telling my own stories, and so I stood before a gallery room in my 60s to share my heart, simply because now I must release what I carry inside. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. I'm a bit, words are not coming to me. I'm just very captivated in your story. You are a beautiful storyteller. Oh my Lord, the positivity, of course, is off the charts. Here we have Lori going, she's blown away. But I have to say, just your being and knowing you the way I do, it's just remarkable that was an experience in your life, and that you are such a powerfully positive human being at this point. And so I want to ask you a million questions, but I'm going to come up with one and get things kicked off, and then allow others to share in. Well, the first thing I want to say is, when you told your story for the first time up on a gallery stage or at the Goodman Theater or wherever it was, how did you feel? Because as you say, you were used to telling other people's stories as a reporter. So how did it feel?
I didn't know whether I was going to vomit or faint, and that's real. That is absolutely real. All of a sudden, I got the spinners, and I was sitting in a corner trying to pull it together, doing deep breaths. Thank you so much. And someone said, "She's going to faint." I am a fainter, and I said, "I am not." So I bucked it up, and I got up there, and I thought, if I'm going to faint, I'm going to faint at this podium. That's it. I'm going to do it. Once I made up my mind to take it out of my notebook and share. What's the point of a notebook? If you're a writer, you're a writer. You must share. Otherwise, it's just in your notebook. And there's a great deal of difference between journaling, and I write short stories along with poems, and still submitting, still working on that play. And it was nerve-wracking. The end. That was it. The breakthrough day, breaking the sound barrier of my own resistance, hesitation, obstacle at that moment. No, the voice says, no, nobody wants to hear. No, maybe you should just put it back in your journal and go home. And I said, no, damn it. I'm here. I'm going to do this. And if I faint in the middle of it, faint at the podium. That's all.
Well, we were with you in that story. We were with you on that street, and we were with you as you put on those stiletto boots. My God, that was amazing. So,
and I never collapsed, exploded, or none of that happened.
Well, that's
and
a good
I
thing.
do walk.
There's a lot of theme in medical challenges for, naysayers from the medical profession. So I love that resilience can conquer all. So anyone else want to pop in before we move on? We're doing well with timing, but I just wanted to open up to anyone else to ask a question with Barbara before we go on to Gina.
Wonderful.
I think if you read in the chat, Barbara, everybody's still sort of in awe of your story. And someone said breathless.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. And I will be following up with emails, but you can also go to the event page and see links to Barbara's books and things like that. I totally recommend them as well. And Kathy Simmons, one of your soul sisters, is here. She just popped a message in there too. Kathy, you're how I met this lovely woman. So thank you so much. You're a spectacular storyteller.
Thank you.
My heart is still beating. Oh my goodness. Well, like fast. I mean, not just still.
And you know, and when I tell it, people are like, sure, it was a pink car. Yeah. And I think that's what kept me frozen in the street. It's like this pink automobile is not rushing up on me and she's going to stop for me. Right. So I stopped and I waited and she did not.
Wow. It's amazing how our
memories. Thank you. YouTube love. I have no idea where this is or where that's at, but thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you all of you before me. What a perfect blending of our histories, our particular challenges, our interest. It's an honor to be here. And thank you for inviting me. Thank you for listening.
So in perfect segue, we will now hear from Gina Vild. So Gina's third act philosophy, or bumper sticker, as I like to call them, is life is calling. Gina is an author, public speaker, and consultant on topics ranging from happiness and resilience to grief. She's the co-author of the best-selling book, The 2 Most Important Days, How to Find Your Purpose and Live a Happier, Healthier Life. And she's also an author of a book in progress called Roses in Winter, Finding Resilience During Troubled Times. Among other things, beyond her brilliant writing and nonstop, positivity, Gina has held senior leadership positions in healthcare, academia, and government. Most recently, she was the Associate Dean and Chief Communications Officer for the Harvard Medical School. She also writes for Psychology Today. So welcome, Gina. It's wonderful to see you.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you. And I'm really honored, Lori, Melissa, and Barbara, to follow you. That was just so inspiring. And Diana, just quickly, I want to thank you for assembling all of us and for including me in your wonderful storytelling event, because storytelling is a form of memoir, right? It's an illumination of the path that we're all on, and our sharing the stories of our journey is a way to help others navigate all the potholes and dead ends so they could hopefully avoid them. And you capture the zeitgeist of the times by bringing together a community to share and inspire. And it's interesting, today I was looking for a book and I stumbled on a book in Synchronicity that I hadn't touched in over 20 years, and it's called Expecting Adam. And I just opened it to a page that I had highlighted, and I just want to share a brief quote with you. This is it. This is it. This is the part of us that makes our brief, improbable little lives worth living. The ability to reach through our own isolation and find strength and comfort and warmth for and in each other. This is what human beings do. This is what we live for, the way horses live to run. And that's what you are doing, Diana, with the 333 Collective. So thank you. And I would just like to share with you a simple story about a simple practice that changed my entire life. And it led me from my second act to my third act, which is where I am now. So I have a confession to make. I was once a human doing. For decades, I worked in these wonderful, high pressure, high profile jobs, some of which you mentioned at Harvard and MIT, and some of the most acclaimed academic medical institutions in the world. And I convinced myself not one of those jobs had an off switch. I lived on a treadmill from the day someone first handed me a first-gen BlackBerry. My phone was the first thing I touched in the morning and the last thing I touched at night. But the phone is really only part of the story because a self-imposed to-do list lived in my head always. And at night, as I slept, it would breed. And in the morning, there were many more things on my to-do list. And of course, my family was at the top of the list. I was room mother, field trip supervisor, wrote school columns for the local paper, ran the elementary school art appreciation, created layers of holiday, Christmas, Thanksgiving, birthday traditions. I took the dog to the vet. I sifted, diced, and baked all of my mother's favorite and best recipes each and every holiday as a way to keep her alive and with us. I was a voracious reader, an enthusiastic and very vocal political activist, and a friend indeed to my friends in need. My hobby was making jewelry, and for 24 years, I've been curating poetry every January to a list of poetry lovers around the world. I traveled frequently, I exercised always, I lived happily in a vibrant whirlpool of busyness. I did it all, and I loved it all. Yet in hindsight, you might ask, and you're probably thinking, was I sufficiently savoring my life? So as I talk, can you just take a second and think about this? Are you sufficiently savoring an hour experiences? But everything changed as I began working on this book. The important days to find your purpose of a happier life. Thrilled to collaborate. We met each weekend to consider content, each meeting with which I accomplished, and I apologized over and over again for what I didn't do. I was certainly well intended, but my life bumping into my commitments. The list of what was important to me was long and wonderful, and everything pretty much had equal priority until everything changed one Sunday afternoon in 2015. Everything changed. Sanjeev told me a friend was visiting to fix his garage door as we worked, but it was a ruse. The friend, Adrian Wilkins, happened to also be an extraordinary life coach. And as I look back, it really remains unclear whether he has any garage door fixing skills. So what I realized as I sat down is it was an intervention. Adrian asked, "Are you afraid of success?" No, absolutely not. Are you afraid you can't write this book? Of course not. I was so excited to fulfill my long aspiration of being an author. Then what's the problem? How did they not see it, right? You see it. Have you met me? I asked. I have 2 children. I have a job. I'm on call around the clock. I explained what I thought should be pretty obvious, that I was juggling a complicated life. And I just did not seem to have the time to deeply focus. Adrian offered a solution at which I scoffed: meditate. He said until I could formally learn mantra meditation from Sanjeev's physician wife, daily the simplicity of their solution, the amusement in my eyes. Surely they could see this. How was meditating going to help me shoehorn a project of such enormous proportion into my already chock-a-block life? Yet Adrian was certain he had just given me the equivalent of open sesame, the magic word that opened Alibaba's cave of treasure. They were confident they had just handed me a gift of magnificent proportion. I was skeptical, but grateful for their interest in trying to fix my life, even if it meant adding one more thing to my to-do list. But what did I have to lose? So on vacation next week, I tried running without headphones. Never once in the 22 years I had run without music in my head, but I wanted to show good faith. And I held the headphones in my hand just in case I couldn't do it. It wasn't easy. 3 days later, after 3 runs, I wrote the entire outline of our book in 3 hours. I had put it off for months, but I found all I needed was 3 hours and a clear mind. But that really isn't the end of the story. Meditation literally altered the entire trajectory of my life. 2 months after running without noise distraction, I formally learned mantra meditation, a simple practice that helped me understand that the noise that was interrupting my being was trash, keeping me from stillness and deep understanding. The change was astounding. My mind quieted, my thoughts came into sharp focus, pushing the litter of random disruptive noise into the abyss. I no longer experienced what the Buddhists call monkey mind, where my thoughts would flit like a monkey, lurching from branch to branch, always moving, never still. I began to notice details that were all around me. I began to pay attention to my intuition, that feeling in our gut that when we get it right should guide all of our decisions. The book project became effortless, but something else was going on. The jumble of thoughts began to untangle, and the threads began to point me toward experiences I had historically refused to see or had not fully processed. I began to pull threads in my life and examine them with greater clarity. And 3 months after learning to practice mantra meditation, I took a clear-eyed look at my marriage. I took a deep breath, and I stopped prettying up the picture for myself as much as for everyone else. My life came into sharp focus and my thinking became clear. I began to look into the shadows that I had unwittingly long ignored. Inexplicably, I saw Pandora's box sitting right in front of me. I opened it, and 3 months after learning mantra meditation, I separated from my husband of 28 years. And at age 59, I began a terrifying, thrilling process of creating an entirely new life. I wish I had time to share with you all I learned about presence, community, dating, love, acceptance during the past year. But if you join me for Diana's monthly resilience group, I share more of what I have learned and more of what I've learned from others. So I just want to ask you to please think about it. Are you a human being or are you a human doing? Do you relish life, deeply inhale experiences, savor the moments, both alone and with friends and family? Or are you weighted down by self-imposed tasks? And do you rush through experiences with one eye on what's next? If you're a human doing, you're not alone. 94% of professionals work more than 50 hours a week. 48%, I'm sure you know many of them, boast about how much time they work. 60% of cell phone users check their phones by habit, even when they're not ringing. 46% say they could not live without your phone. Are you one of them? So meditation comes in many forms: mantra, breathing, forest bathing, moving meditation, single focus, Buddha. But meditation is the cure. It places a laser-like focus on the self and is the equivalent of sharpening the blade of a knife. It lowers your blood pressure, slows breathing, improves rest, boosts immunity, lessens stress, and increases telomeres, those little end caps on our chromosomes that serve as a protective function so that our cells replicate. When they do so free of error. And the telomere length also correlates to the length of one's lifespan. I don't know if you're aware of that the longer the telomere, the longer the lifespan, which is the Nobel research of Elizabeth Blackburn. So if this interests you, this topic at all, look up Sarah Lazar. We worked together at Harvard, and her studies show the measurable effects of meditation on brain activity. And do you know, I'll leave you with who best understands the importance of being present? Those in hospice. There's been a lot of research that's been done. It's Australian research by a hospice nurse. And the aha that those in hospice articulate is that they should have acted on what they wanted rather than what they thought they should do. They should have expressed feelings, stayed in touch with people who mattered, and they wish they had let themselves be happier by better curating their life, determining how it was lived and with whom they spent it. And they also said, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. So there's always time to be present in your life until there isn't. And so I leave you with the words of the Buddha. These hang prominently in my home, and I look at them every day. I hung them when I walk by, I can see them. They remind me, as he said, the trouble is you think you have time. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. I know some of the folks in the room, but many of us have worn a badge of honor over the years for our level of productivity. So thanks you for being authentic about and sharing your intervention moment with your dear friend and co-author Sanjeev. So talk to us a little bit before we move on to our next storyteller, and share a little bit about opening this Pandora's box and how that has played into the book you're writing, which is about resilience, sharing resilience stories.
Yeah, I find memoir, for those of you who are writers, very difficult because it shines a light on other people's lives. But I think there are ways to do it. And I'm writing a book on resilience, not so much to regurgitate what happened to me, although my editor tells me that's important and I have to do some of that, but really to show what do people rely on, myself included. What are the tools and resources you can use and rely on to be more resilient? And I've interviewed 30 individuals. I'm probably only going to use 12 of the stories, but I talk about manifesting, about being present, about acceptance, about the role of community, and actual practices, things you can do. It's a book filled with exercises and ideas and other people's stories and my story. And I liken resilience to the art of Japanese pottery, which I'm sure you're aware of, where they put the pieces back together and they bond them with gold. And it's more beautiful than what previously existed. And I think we live in troubled times in the world, in the country, and there is a calling for resilience on so many fronts, not only personal.
So. Yes, thank you for that image of the Japanese pottery. I think that for all of us, as I mentioned earlier tonight, we can't live on this planet for 50 plus years and not have some big life disruption, whether it be health or some other happenstance of losing a job, losing a loved one, whatever it is, we've all been there. So I think the closer we inch toward the end zone, I think the more we grab hold of every day and every moment and appreciate in such a way. That's if there's any gift coming from challenging times. Anyone else have any questions they want to ask Gina before we move on to Sandy? Well, I think you've gotten a lot of wonderful comments of people that really enjoyed your story. Gina, thank you so much. It was wonderful to see you, my dear. So our next storyteller is Sandy Chiaramontaro, and she is an exceptionally wonderful educator and inspiration for young people. Her bumper sticker, her philosophy is, we are here to love. That is what life is for. She's the author, she's a teacher, and she's the founder and CEO of the Good Eggs Foundation. She has also implemented programs and a curricula that are focused on helping children realize the importance of living altruistic lives centered on love. The Good Eggs series of books is her contribution to supporting children as they learn about virtues, diversity, and service, all essential concepts to integrate into their lives. She's also, the Good Eggs Foundation is fascinating. She is dedicated to helping children in need through what she calls cleverly eggings, which are various types of donations and experiences that she shares in the community. So she is here live with us, but she has recorded a beautiful story that we're going to play for you right now before we open up for questions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sandy Chiaramontaro, and I'm very honored to be part of this panel today. Thank you, Diana, for inviting me. I wanted to title my talk Imagination. Why imagination? Let me explain. So as long as I can remember, I've had a very, very vivid imagination. Before I could read, I would look at pictures and books and make up stories that would go along with the pictures. Once I was able to read, I just loved the project that our teacher would assign us about making up stories using our spelling words, reading them in front of the class. They were always filled with vivid characters and fun adventures. So I knew that was something that I wanted to do. When I got a little bit older, about 10 years old, I started to realize there's another kind of imagination out there, and that maybe as I grow, I can connect my vivid childhood imagination with a new kind of adult imagination. So, picture this. I'm 10 years old, sitting on my bed, spinning my 45s. I'm sure you will remember those. And my favorite one that I kept spinning over and over and over was John Lennon's Imagine. That song opened up something inside of me that I couldn't quite put into words as I was still very young, but I knew it tapped into a desire that I had for serving and for social justice. So I always kept that song in my heart, and it still is there today. So, how did all this play out? Well, life gets busy, as you know. So I grow up, get married, have 3 children, and I'm always running, doing this, band practice, baseball practice, dance lessons, all kinds of things going on. But that desire was still inside of me to write this book and to serve. And I said, somehow it's going to connect. Didn't know how, but I had to get off to another birthday party or something that the kids had. So finally, once my children grew, at enough age where I could start getting some time back to myself, that desire was still there, and it was still kind of talking to me. You gonna write that book? Yes, I'm gonna write that book. I dug deep into my childhood imagination, and I really intended to just write one book, but I ended up writing a series of 3 called The Good Eggs. They teach the important concepts of virtues, diversity, and service to young children. The books were complete, but I still felt my adult imagination pulling at me. I had to put the books into action, which drove me to start the Good Eggs Foundation. It's a nonprofit that helps kids with basic needs. Each month I egg an organization or a family that may need help. By keeping my imagination close to me, both childhood and adult imagination, I have received a tremendous amount of joy in my life. Not to say I haven't had my bumps in the road, because I've definitely had my share of those. But getting over those bumps and staying true and focused to what's in your heart, that's what truly brings you fulfillment. My imagination still moves me every day. My future vision for the book series and the foundation keep growing and growing, and I will be focusing on that vision as I continue well into my 3rd act. So, keep your imagination close. You never know what can grow out of it. Imagine all the people living life in peace. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. Hi, Diana.
Thank you. Thank you. So these books are fantastic. Tell me a little bit about the series, and also tell me a little bit about where people can find them. I tried to post the link in the chat, but I got frazzled with all the timing on things. So, but they are on Amazon, right?
Yes, they are. So, and you can find that on my website. So if they went to the books tab, there'll be a link that'll go right to the Amazon page. But it's a series of 3. And the first one teaches virtues. So it goes 12 chapters, which is like for a dozen for the eggs. There's a lot of egg puns in there. Each month, so they go back to school in September, and then each month the eggs learn something new. So for example, the first month is understanding. So a little situation will occur where they'll have to use understanding. And it's just on a child's level. So it's nothing groundbreaking, or on an adult level, of course, but it helps kids to relate to relationships with each other. And the hope is that as they're so young and growing, that it gets incorporated into them as a natural aspect of their lives. So then it goes on, there's forgiveness and generosity and gratitude, and there's 12 in all that kids can take with them and learn as they grow. So then the second book, I like I said in my video, I just intended to write the one, but then the second book, I wasn't done with the eggs, and I took them on a trip around the world. So they visited 10 different countries, and they learned language and custom and culture and all about little eggs around the world and what makes the world work and how everybody wants to just live in that peace and to be heard and respected and loved. So they come back from that trip, and then I had one more to write. They stay in their hometown and they learn the importance of community service. So they help children and animals, and they go to an elder care center, and they put on a health program, go to a nature center, everything involved with the community they do. So it's a three years of their lives that you see them grow and learn. So I've been really excited about it because I've had parents and teachers write to me about the impact that it's been having on their kids. So it's been an exciting journey.
Well, I want to reflect on one other thing and see if anybody wants to raise their hand if they have comments or questions for Sandra. So in all of the stories tonight, you've witnessed women who, Gina just mentioned she didn't want to be a human doing anymore. She wanted to be a human being. And how do you find personally that you were able to juggle being a teacher, a mother, and write these books, but now to running this foundation you've started?
Yeah, it's a lot. And I appreciated when Gina said that, because I completely can relate to that. You get on this treadmill, right? And you're running and running, and something inside you just says enough, like enough already. And what is the purpose of all this, right? And you want to really get more of that meaning out of life. So I'm in that part now where I'm really focusing on the being part. I really want to get out of just the doing and into the being. And I know you mentioned Brene Brown at the beginning. She speaks to that a lot, and so does Elizabeth Gilbert.
Yes.
I always take what she says. She says, when you can't stand one more minute in a meeting about the parking lot or about cafeteria or something, it's time to move. So that's where I am now, and I'm really focusing on making this hopefully my last year in the classroom, although I love it, but I know that I'm meant to do more of this book shows, book tours. And I was really inspired by our filmmakers too, because I really would like to get the books into film. I did have the first book made into 12 episodes of videos that just got picked up by the Michigan Learning Channel.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, they're an affiliate of PBS. So that's exciting. So I'm hoping that this project just keeps morphing and morphing and morphing, and I'm just letting it morph because I feel that's what it's going to do on its own. So I'm trying to guide it, as it grows. So I've got so many ideas and visions and hopes for it for the future. I would like my being to be into that full time, hopefully within the year.
Well, I think that what you're experiencing is what anyone who figures out what's calling them or figures out in their life what means the most to them and where they want to put their energy. It's almost like this path opens up for you. And as you say, you're following your heart and you're being led to all the different opportunities. I think personally that the idea of these eggings is just a beautiful way, and to connect children with that process in community is priceless. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been great. I've just been meeting so many wonderful people and being able to help people with the eggings. Just, you feel like you're taking it. Maybe it might sound small, but it feels like you're taking a load off of somebody. You're relieving their stress. You're making their day a little bit better.
So give us an example of your latest egging.
Well, the latest one I did was there was a man here who builds beds for kids coming out of homelessness, and he needed bedding for the beds. So I got a whole bunch of those bed in a bags and went to where his factory is. And I said, "You've been egged." And I got a whole bunch of those. So he was real happy about that. So that was a fun one. And actually, I also just egged a woman who started a organization for teen mothers, and they were very, very low on diapers. And I said, "I can do that." So I went and got all those big box diapers and drove a whole bunch over to where she helps the teen girls, and you've been egged. So, each month it's different too, which is what I like. So I look at the needs of what people, are asking for or what they may need. We have a foster closet here. They were totally out of baby monitors. So I said, I can do that. So we got some donors together and bought the baby monitors and brought them over to them. So it's something different each month. And that's been just a joy to meet all different people doing different things for the community. So all together we can work it out.
Well, I like this all together, and I hope you get more and more support, both from donors and for people buying your books and people volunteering to help you with these eggings. Because I have this image of you with, 75 boxes of diapers in the back of your car.
Oh, yeah. And, I just would love to do, like, I just saw a story tonight on our news channel. This woman opened a homework house for kids in the area. Her next thing is to build a playground. I said, I would love to build that playground for her. Like that's the point I want to get to, the bigger up doing these eggings right now, but I wanted them to grow. So that's what I'm focusing on.
Well, you're putting a smile on the face of the women that are writing in the chat today that they really enjoyed hearing your story. And I also, you're on the list for, people in my life that are in the younger. I've got some great nieces and nephews that I think would just love these books, at least to be read these books from an early age and then later on read them themselves. So
Right.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing your light with the world and doing all the work that you're doing to help connect children with the essentials of life. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Now, next we're going to move on to Rebecca Moore. We met years ago in Boston with an organization called Businesses for Social Responsibility. And we've sort of had a nice little beautiful parallel path, and it's gotten closer and closer over the years. So I'm so happy for that. But I want she's going to share a beautiful, inspiring story. But first I'm going to tell you about her a bit. So her bumper sticker for her third act is, "It's never too late to cultivate your purpose." Rebecca's an art historian turned entrepreneur. She founded her own VC-backed startup called museumshop.com in the 90s. And hello, ladies, this is when most of us didn't even know that there was an internet or that you could buy stuff there. So you were right at the bleeding edge in that world, in the digital world. It was actually the first internet retailer to partner with museums. Alas, 9/11 brought the demise of the company, and yet Rebecca was able to then spend a decade raising 3 kids, leading in the community and caring for her aging parents. Then she decided to re-enter the startup world at age 53 and has taken all that she's learned and experienced, all the good and the bad, and now coaches female founders to monetize their ideas and scale them. She consults to the business and coaches to the human. And so as you're here with her story tonight, her mission is to embolden women, especially those in the third chapter of their lives, to monetize their brilliance. I love that. Through entrepreneurship, to create a really fulfilling way of making a living and making an impact. So Rebecca, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Wow, I guess I don't need to do my story now. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you, Diana. So pleased to be here. So I'm just going to jump in, and I'm going to go really fast here because I think we're a little short on time. But maybe you are on this platform here because you're looking for a new destination. So tonight, I'm going to take you on a ride in my train of thought and hopefully energize you out of your comfort zone. I'm going to start by reading the byline of a book. I don't know if any of you have read this, by Cassandra Speaks. It's called Cassandra Speaks by Elizabeth Lesser. So relevant to tonight. The byline is, "When women are the storytellers, the human story changes." And she challenges us to be change makers by telling our stories. After all, we women are 50% of the human story. And I want to point out that for mid-century modern women, that's my term, like us, I'm in my late 50s, I think that we're at a seminal juncture in history because we are the most educated, experienced, wise group of women ever to exist in human history. I mean, raise your hand if you've graduated from high school, from college, earned a master's degree, maybe a PhD, you've raised children, you've served on a board, you founded a company, you've served on a nonprofit. For heaven's sake, we have a collective voice. And yet, so often our stories are overlooked because they're not stories about power and domination. Her stories are about caregiving for the elderly or the sick, and that's not headline news. We are not interested, many of us, I'm not, in building empires or smashing the competition. We want to help solve the world's problems before it's too late. Lesser speaks about the need for us to do power differently, and I agree. I think it's time for us to tell our stories from a fresh feminine perspective. And Brené Brown, all of us are quoting her here, as she put it, we get to write a brave new ending. Why does it have to be brave? Well, because we're going to ruffle a few feathers, all right? We're going against the grain of tradition and status quo, and it's a different story than we grew up hearing. So hopefully tonight, my hope is that this will be a little bit of a catalyst for you to join me in writing your story and creating a better ending for humanity. Easy, right? Okay, my minivan moment happened 5 years ago. I found myself gripping the steering wheel of my minivan. I was in a nursing home parking lot, and I was experiencing the most sickening wave of adrenaline I'd ever felt. It felt like hot steam kind of coming from my feet through my torso up out through my head. And here's what was going through my mind. I was thinking to myself, how could it be that 15 years ago, I was having a similar out-of-body experience, standing in the corner of Madison Avenue, a block away from Grand Central Station, taxis whizzing by. Remember taxis? Flip phone in my hand. Remember those? I was frozen. It felt like time had completely stopped. And this adrenaline pulsing through my body was totally different. It was excitement. I was in happy shock. I had just hung up from the call of a lifetime. I had heard that our second round of funding was a green light. This meant my internet startup would make it after all. We'd make payroll. We could proceed with our radio campaign on NPR. We could sell our 4,000 products from 70 museums around the world on our brand new cultural commerce web platform. It was a go. This 35-year-old reluctant MBA, first-time entrepreneur, art historian with limited business experience, no network, had done the impossible. Through sheer grit and a lot of passion, she'd created this innovative company from the seed of an idea and funded its growth with 10 million in venture capital. She'd assembled an amazing team with supportive friends and family and partners. All this while starting a family, first home, first baby. So back in the minivan, I sank in my seat. This was a completely different kind of energy. This steam was shame and rage. It was delivering a message to me that I could not ignore any longer. It was the agonizing, soul-sucking moment when I realized that I was in the wrong place. This new startup I joined that helped women feel good and thrive through a beautiful, beautiful line of lingerie and clothing that had an awesome community aligned with my mission to support women entrepreneurs. It was not my ticket to a meaningful livelihood. You see, I had just fitted a client's elderly mother for a custom fit bra. She had Alzheimer's. Meanwhile, the rest of my team was at a big PR event at headquarters a mile away, and I hadn't been invited. I was feeling such rage and shame, even after such a poignant moment, because I was angry at myself for settling for a position that was nowhere near my zone of genius. I was ashamed at myself for wanting more out of life when I had so much. And I was really upset at feeling underappreciated and undervalued at my company. Deep down, I knew I had energy and experience that could make a difference somewhere. Having just battled cancer, I felt an urgency to share this wisdom before I went to the grave. Like, why bottle it in? So at that moment, it became painfully clear that there was no seat at the table for me at that company. I had to create my own table, start my own business again at age 53. Okay, guys, despite the impact of that aha moment, it took me 2 more years to actually leave because I was terrified. I dreaded starting from scratch again because I knew what it was like to bootstrap, to forgo a salary until I'd created a well-oiled machine. I knew there was no guarantees, and I was terrified of burning out again, like I did building museumshop.com, like I did the prior decade navigating parenting and volunteering and caregiving. That time was really gratifying, but also emotionally exhausting, intellectually unfulfilling, and traumatizing. Between miscarriages, cancer, mental illness, death. So what would fuel me through this next journey without burning out? I knew I had to create work that leveraged my creativity and experience, gave me flexibility so that I could maintain my health and care for my family, and have standards that were congruent with mine. So this fuel was my deep conviction that when you create your own business, you get to define your own standards. You can make an impact in your own sphere of influence, no matter what size it is. So I'm here to say that I believe business, commerce, and money are not inherently bad. They can really fuel positive change in the world, but the leadership has to change. We leaders get to set different standards and rules based on fostering positive influence. To paraphrase Gandhi, we get to replace the love of power with the power of love. And that is why I'm so passionate about encouraging women entrepreneurs. So my minivan moment was the spark that gave me the motivation, the energy, the courage to start my own business in my own integrity. And it would take me 5 years to transform from incorporating in a nutshell consulting and having a steady flow of clients. But I'm here to say that since then, I've been able to coach, advise, and mentor thousands of women, from solopreneurs and coaches in acting, voice, wellness, fields, to artisans and architects, to founders of digital agencies and retreat centers and innovative startups in age tech, femtech, and fintech industries. And although it has not been all sunshine and rainbows, okay, it's not a 7-figure business yet, I still have discouraging days and months, but it's okay, because building my own table is a process that is fulfilling and meaningful to me, and it makes a small difference. It's a long-term investment in me, and I have the satisfaction of knowing that I'm using my talents as best as I can. I know that entrepreneurship hasn't been possible for so many women in our world because of lack of financial security, credit history, lack of childcare and elder support, but it is beginning to change. So what does this have to do with you on your journey? Well, first, I just want to share that you don't need to have a minivan moment to have a life-changing insight. It can come in tiny moments, in books and conversations, songs, or events like this tonight. And second, I don't share this story to impress you. I share it to impress upon you how important it is to reflect on your station, because you can play a part in changing history. So I'm hoping that this one tiny story tonight will illustrate that although we mid-century modern women have been underpaid and overlooked and silenced in the past, I think that today we have tremendous wisdom, resources, and influence to offer the world. We see that our world has been doing power differently, or doing power wrong for too long, and we get to do it differently. We get to bring our wise women perspectives to human history and be good stewards of our money. So tonight, I just want to encourage you to go out there, support the women in your life to become leaders wherever they are, invest in their businesses if they have one, teach your sons and daughters and grandkids to prioritize financial, intellectual, and emotional well-being that includes being financially and emotionally responsible. Okay, so we're back on this platform. My train of thought is coming to an end, thank God, right? So maybe you are unsure of your next stop and you're afraid that the train has already left the station. Maybe you're afraid that taking action feels like throwing yourself under the tracks. But what if, like my minivan moment, that discomfort is your signal? Your call to stretch yourself, to revisit and renew your purpose. So I'm here tonight to remind you that your purpose deserves attention. It's a living and breathing thing that evolves with you. It's never too late to cultivate your purpose. You get to write a brave new ending to your story. Your story deserves to unfold and be told, because we each have the chance to do power differently. And the good news here is you are not alone. The crowd on this platform is cheering you on. Thanks for going on this journey with me.
Oh man, oh my gosh, Rebecca. First, thank you for opening up and sharing what was a very terrifying and sad moment in your minivan story. Is something I think we can all relate to in some degree, but mostly thank you for your inspiration. For those of us that are entrepreneurs, building your own table or creating your own table is not easy. So it's really nice to be aligned with others who, like yourself, you can see the opportunities. But more than anything, I just, as your friend for years, I remark on what takes a lot of setting fear aside, setting regret aside. So it seems as though you don't live in regret. You live in possibility. Is that true?
You know, I I have had moments of regret, but my new philosophy is really that what gives me incredible hope is that no road is ever wasted. No path that we take is ever wasted. And sometimes I think the hard part is that sometimes when we look back on it, it takes, we can't really see it until we look in the rearview mirror and they're like, oh, that's why I did that. Because during that time when I was working at the athleisure company, I was so out of alignment and I knew it, but I didn't want to quit because I thought, well, maybe, you know, maybe
Wow.
my sound panel that won't stick to the wall.
I love it.
Hilarious. The sky is falling.
It's like somebody throwing things at you.
Anyway, but yeah, it's, and we've had this conversation many times before, when you're, and others who are telling their stories, when you're going through cancer, it is a wake-up call. And you look back and you're like, holy Toledo, I've got to make the most of every minute. And I want also 3 daughters later, many miscarriages, 3 daughters, 3 amazing daughters later. I owe it to my daughters to let them know that, life isn't over when you turn 50.
Absolutely.
We have so much energy, so much to do. And there's so much work to be done. Good stuff though.
Well, thanks for shining your light on that. I love your term, mid-century modern women. Love that. I want to open it up to see, you've got a lot of comments. People really enjoyed your inspiration. Does anyone have a specific question you want to ask Rebecca?
Daniel, some comments about Daniel Pink.
Daniel Pink's new book, Value of Regret.
Got to read that one. Thank you.
Well, and along with that, fear is a topic we all well know about, but I think we're hopefully getting better at understanding that fear belongs in our lives to keep us safe, but that we learn how to not necessarily let it have a seat in the front seat as we drive our own little bus of life, right? So.
I've heard, I've participated in a mastermind over the past, very intense mastermind over the past 4 months, and there was a wonderful comment that I think is so helpful, and it's, if you think of the tough times as contrast, instead of this awful thing that's happening to you, it's, oh, that's contrast. When you get through that struggle, which is contrast, you can appreciate and celebrate.
That's nice.
Better, when you get through that. I just think that's remarkably encouraging.
Well, thank you for the work that you do. And for anyone that's a budding entrepreneur or someone who needs a little light in their lives, Rebecca also has a number of really interesting ways she serves. You have a monthly Founders Test Kitchen where people can connect and meet. She also she leads one of the groups in the 333 Collective around entrepreneurship, which is fun. So she has a monthly session there too, where she encourages.
And I do that with Ellie Lane, who's also, so the both of us, we're having something next month. So a little mixer for entrepreneurs who are on the 333 Collective.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So next we'll move along to our next wonderful storyteller. I'm just going to, Patricia Ralpher. Now, as I've introduced each one, I will start with what she identified as her third act bumper sticker. And she borrowed this from Oscar Wilde, and it's a good one. Be yourself. Everyone else is taken. So I'll let Patricia share a little bit more, but I want to give a little introduction by saying that she has led a really fascinating life. In the corporate world, she led transformational initiatives in marketing and technical roles in a really wide range of industries. She's passionate about making things real. whether that be a digital product, a fine craft project, a watercolor painting, or a design concept. Patricia is all about creating the new. Her approach is holistic, and she applies systems thinking and has been a pioneer, an adjunct professor, and creator and maker. She was involved in the nascent days of the digital marketplace using systems, and we aligned, actually didn't know each other at the time, at America Online. Critical systems thinking is something that she has learned to apply in digital initiatives, and she now uses this approach with her undergrad students in developing models to address different economic, social, and environmental issues. So Patricia, welcome today.
Thank you, Diana. It's a pleasure to be here with this group of women, quite an accomplished group, and thank you for putting us together. So my story is about creating the new, and it's about being a pioneer and creating things that maybe are now part of everyday life and have a history, and I am part of that history. So if you pay with points, or if you make travel reservations and you do that online instead of using the phone to call your travel agent, that's something that I worked on. Or if you use digital media, I was part of that as well. And I basically combine my creative practice with technical skills. And so I look at them equally. I look at the creativity and the technology equally. And I came to this concept of being equal about my creativity as well as my technical or business skills actually very, very early in my career. It actually happened when I was working for TWA, and you may remember the TWA hostage incident, which happened in 1985. So in that incident, basically the hijackers had TWA flight 847 go from, instead of going to Rome as it was scheduled, instead it went to Beirut and then to Algiers, back to Beirut. So lots of movement around with the plane. And I was the person who sent the messages about what was happening with the plane from the corporate headquarters to the international region. And the reason I did that was because I was the one who knew how to use the computer. And so I knew how to use the computer because I had trained travel agents in the technology in this distributed network. And this was in the early days of distributed networks. It was 1985. So I not only trained the travel agents, but I was using the network as well for a marketing tool. And so as the travel agents would sign in the morning, I would tell them about the new TWA routes, or I told them about promotions and whatnot. And so when it came time, I'm sorry about that. When it came time for the flight to be, when it came time for I'm sorry, I lost my my train of thought with my my lighting here. So when it came time for,
take your time. You know, we're having sound things fall from the ceiling. We're having,
okay, there we go.
Turn off. Yeah.
All right.
Cool. Take a breath.
Now. Yeah, sorry about that. So when it came time for somebody to do this, they asked me to do it. And so it was quite a like stressful thing, like losing my light here. But in any event, the thing that I learned from it was not only about using the technology in an interesting way, but also that I had to really worry about follow-up. I had to take care of follow-up as well. And so the way that came about was that when I sent the message to the international region about the flight, or about the disposition of that plane, I went up to tell the bosses that I had sent this message. And as a result, they asked me, well, did they get it? And while I couldn't tell them whether they got it or not, because I didn't know. And so I felt like like an idiot, because I had to go back and then check to see whether they actually had gotten the message. and my time to shine, I missed it, right? And so I was really upset with myself. But I was thinking on the way back to my office that what if I'm sitting at the CRT and I sent the message to the international region? What if I sent the message got to the printer? Why couldn't the printer tell me that the message was received? And then I thought, well, if it didn't have to be a printer, it could be another CRT. So in 1 minute, I was working for the airlines, and the next minute I was working in technology. So that was like something that was an aha moment. The other thing that happened is when I left TWA, my colleague told me that our boss was impressed with me about something. And so I'm thinking that it had to do with the fact that I had done this thing with the hostage incident, or I had been using the computers for technology and for marketing. Well, it turns out what he was impressed with was that I made my own clothes. And he thought that that was kind of like amazing that I made my own clothes. And he knew that because not only did I make my suits to wear to work, but I also had made a wedding dress for one of my friends at TWA. So he knew all about that. And so it was just kind of an aha that was like, wow, the creativity is really what was more important than, or at least as important as the business or the technical skills. And so from there, I decided I was working in technology, and then I went to work on what I call the original digital transformation. So I basically went from analog to digital in a project for Sabre, where I basically figured out with my team how to actually do online reservations. And then I went to Prodigy and had AOL as my client, and learned that the business model from Prodigy versus the business model from AOL was one of transactions versus user experience. And so I went back to get my MBA, and I chose the University of Southern California because it had a program that was organizational effectiveness. And at University of Southern California, I was able to attend what I call the Rock Stars of Management event. And the Rock Stars of Management is that Warren Bennis gave an award to Peter Drucker. And so I was able to attend that event. And I was like so happy to be there, but also very happy because I was able to sit with Betty Friedan and thank her for her work as a feminist and to having read The Feminine Mystique. And so I ended up then going to work for Citi, where I created new products and digital types of things and combined airline systems with payments, and worked on chip cards and did pay with points. So all these kind of new technical projects and whatnot. But basically what I learned is that it's really important for me to always have an ability to do something that's very creative, because the creativity is what feeds the technical. And so it's kind of an equal both kind of thing. And so I ultimately left Citi when my mother was dying, and my sister, my twin sister, had some serious illness. And because of that, it was very apparent to me that I had to be really paying attention to that life is short. And so now I'm teaching students at Jefferson University in Philadelphia. I teach a course called Systems Thinking and Sustainability. And I'm also moving on to the next generation in my own practice, where I am consulting on new products and services, again, digital. And I'm also a next generation in my own hobbies and practices, in that I just sold my first watercolor to an interior design client. And so what I learned is that my selling that watercolor was as important to me as launching big digital product. And so it was like equal or more, because it was so personal. And I felt like so accomplished that I was taking a step out in a creativity that I wasn't familiar with. And also because watercolor certainly has a mind of its own sometimes. And so it was really quite the lesson for me. So I'm still creating the new, but I'm creating the new in new areas.
Oh my gosh. So there's so many things that I want to acknowledge the amazing achievements the clarity with which I think as a very young person in your career, you saw these possibilities, this innovative way of looking at things. It's remarkable. And, you know, as you sit here now, I also just want to mention and just really applaud how you have appreciated both and the many parts of your brain, the creative, the technical, you know, and how they marry with each other. So talk to us a little bit about the creative side of you. You know, you shared that you made your own clothes. Like, who makes their own clothes, their own suits? That's amazing. And by the way, is the expert at transmitting and creating brilliant technology. So tell us a little bit about creativity and the projects that are turning you on right now.
So, well, I actually grew up sewing and making my own clothes. And part of it was because of having a lot of brothers and sisters. And I just always thought that, well, I could make it. Like, you know, I know how to do that. I could figure it out. Marie Forleo's has something that she says, everything is figure outable. And I kind of figured like it's figure outable. And if I wanted to have nice clothes, I would have to make them. So I started, I guess when I was about, I think I must have been like 12. So, and I basically have made like 4 wedding dresses. I've done a man's suit. So it's sort of, you know, like very, very tailored and very, very precise. So the watercolor is a stretch for me because it's not precise in any way, but it is about color. And the way that I think is very structural. So to me, the structure of a digital product is no different in terms of the way that I think than, say, structure in economics or structure in a room or structure in a garment. So it's the way of looking at things from like, it's really what systems thinking is. So thinking from the whole structure holistically, and then seeing how things interact. And when I'm doing a product, then I'm thinking at the end, what's the end thing that I'm looking to do? And I take the steps to get to the end. And so you can pivot, you know, so if you're making a mistake or something happens, then you pivot and you have something to work from. Or sometimes you just have to give it up and just say, well, I'm not going to make that because it really didn't work out. So it's kind of that combination of things. But it's also, like I feel like now one of the things that I'm lucky to do is to be working with students. So, you know, I basically am teaching them to be thinking this way as well, to think systemically, think of how the systems are all interconnected. And I also believe that the issues of sustainability are what digital work was to us back in the day, like that we need to really be addressing this. And while there's lots of opportunity, there's also lots of necessity. And so I kind of I feel like it's a responsibility for me, since I know how to think like this, to be working with undergraduates to get them to be doing the same thing.
Well, I see it's such a value, the systems thinking approach that you've applied to your life, to your work now, and to your teaching is something we could all learn from. I think we all want to take a class with you.
Thank you.
You know, as entrepreneurs, I think it's incredibly, you mentioned pivoting, learning, and it's, you know, it's application for our lives. So I don't want to hog the line. Does anyone else have any questions before we open up for Anita Baker? Let's see. Oh, Anita Baker has a question.
So it's just really interesting that I'm following Patricia, because you'll see there are some common threads, but it's interesting that you say that about the systems thinking, because I was listening to a podcast, Design Matters, with Debbie Millman, and she was talking to people who like teach and design and stuff. And she was talking, the person she was interviewing was saying that in design schools, now they're teaching them about like design thinking, systems thinking, and applying that holistically to these other problems. So you're like really helping to enable that whole thing from a slightly different direction.
Yeah, and actually, when I was getting my MBA, I had read a book called The Fifth Discipline before I chose USC. And The Fifth Discipline was written by Peter Senge, and it was about the discipline of systems thinking. And in that book, there was a chapter on personal mastery about it was written about Robert Fritz, who I had studied with. I had studied he had a course called Technologies for Creating. And so it's come full circle for me, because now I had studied that before I did my MBA, and now I'm teaching systems thinking. And some of the people that I studied with at USC, they had done some work in that area as well. So it's just like systems thinking is now sort of what design thinking was a number of years ago, but it's really important because you're looking holistically at how everything interconnects. And I really think it's important for undergraduates to have those tools, because it's not only design tools, it's the tools to see how they interrelate with each other.
Well, thank you so much, Patricia. And I think sort of coming after Rebecca's message that cultivating our purpose, and it's clear that how you've applied your innate and cultivated skills to support the generations that follow us in their way of thinking and solving problems in sustainability. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
All right. So next we're on to Anita Baker. So here is Anita's words of wisdom delivered on a bumper sticker. With curiosity, there are always opportunities to learn, evolve, and grow with vitality, no matter your age. So Nita has shared a little bit with us in her comments today, is a business development consultant and writer. Her first career also was in media. She was at the forefront of the evolution of media media-enabled changes in technology. She worked in the cable and interactive industries as a senior director at MTV Networks and consulting for an internet content and e-commerce companies. She also worked in boutique marketing consulting firms and has led biz dev, partnership initiatives, and strategy for late-stage startups and companies in a high-growth mode. Her passions turned to the travel industry, and she started a service for women 50 plus traveling solo. So that's a little bit of another story. So today we're going to hear more about how her 6 years dealing with kidney disease has led her to a period of beautiful exploration. So Anita, take it away.
Hi. So as I was saying, it's funny that I followed Patricia, because Patricia and I actually were at Prodigy at the same time. And one of the areas that I was doing business development for was travel and Sabre. So it's really funny how later, just more recently, we've connected and, and discovered that we had that love of media and technology and thinking holistically and creating new things and creating structures out of a little bit that's there. So to my kidney story. So on my first trip to the Modern Elder Academy in Baja in March 2019, I did what has become a custom in their midlife transitions workshops, a session with Saul, the resident shaman. So as Saul and I stood on the cliffs at sunrise overlooking the ocean, he held my hands. I was on the verge of kidney failure, and he felt my fear. As the horizon in the morning stretched from dark, kind of going over to light. Oops, I should turn this up. Sorry. Sorry about that. But anyway, as it kind of stretched, from light to dark, and it started unfolding in a kind of a gentle way, it told me a story, which was basically that there was a distinct ending to one phase of my life, and then there was going to be an opening up to a whole new life that was going to be my most successful and my most vibrant and my most purposeful. So 3 years earlier, when I was 60 years old, my nephrologist told me that if I wanted to do anything spontaneous, travel, swim, really anything, to do it right away, because my kidney could fail at any time and then I'd be stuck. So I traveled around the globe solo. I went to Israel and Australia and Asia and Bali and Europe and Costa Rica. And when I returned 10 months later, I had to focus on the kidney disease and solving that. So it was, and ahead of me were complex, time-consuming, energy draining, and seemingly insurmountable obstacles. I thought I might never find my way through, but I was determined. So I searched for a deceased donor kidney at transplant centers across the United States. Patient wait times average 8 to 10 years in the state of California, where I live. patients often die, before they ever, get a kidney. So I focused on highly ranked centers with shorter wait times. I went through batteries of tests at their locations. I was approved for 6 wait lists and then continued, doing more. And it was difficult, but I did it. So I had to figure out next how to cover the 20% that my Medicare A and B insurance didn't, and other expenses as well. At the time, my financial situation was pretty precarious, and it was worrying. It took 5 months to find the state program that a counselor at the Cleveland Clinic had told me about, which caps monthly out-of-pocket expenses. Did all the paperwork, got that settled. And then a new friend who's really skilled at fundraising coached me on what to do, and made me accountable, every week. Did you do this? Did you do that? I raised almost $18,000 through a campaign for a charity called Help Hope Live. And then $5,000 on Facebook, some donations from people, that I didn't know at all. So it was daunting, but I did it. I saw experimental medical innovations too. So one of the things that I discovered that's really promising are these trials, these clinical trials, with using pigs and their kidneys. And there's been a lot of success in that area. And then I was in New York at the Frick Museum, and I was looking at an exhibit of, design and innovation. And I saw an artificial kidney that looked like origami. And so UCSF, where I was being followed, was one of 2 centers in the United States that actually was in the process of applying for grants for these artificial, kidney trials. And so I asked my doctor if she could put me on the list. So she did. I was on the top of that list. But I don't know if any of those I didn't know if any of those would happen in time, for me. So I found a living donor. The National Kidney Foundation advises that it takes 7 tries if you're lucky. So I crafted the copy for an email blast and sent it out. One part of that that was to 16 emails to UCLA Anderson alumni, where I went to business school. And so on my first try, an alum from there responded, and he said that he had started testing, and this was during COVID. So I did it. It was a miracle, but I had to overcome my hesitancy and my embarrassment about reaching out in order to do that. So I also traveled despite a challenged immune system, anemia, and other kinds of concerns. So I went to South America with a friend of mine in April of 2019. And then later that year, I went to Florida for my cousin's 60th birthday party, who lives in Parkland, by the way, which was kind of interesting. And then to Portugal and Spain, and then to London for the Christmas markets. So I wound up in urgent care 4 times, twice because of the bronchitis that I caught in Chile. And then I happened to be in London during that early COVID phase before it was actually recognized. So I was sick for about 3 weeks in London, and then flying over to Miami to finish some of the tests for their wait list. But I didn't let it stop me. I stayed as healthy as I could. I never allowed myself to think of myself as a sick person. I had to get creative, my heavily restricted diet. So I invented recipes. I couldn't eat things I certainly couldn't have salt. I had to watch my potassium and my dairy and the phosphorus. So I limited dairy, very few green vegetables. Most fruits were off the list. I couldn't have grains. I couldn't have nuts, any of that kind of thing. So they had to get pretty creative to do that. And then I managed my stress and stamina with exercise, mostly yoga and Pilates and walking and swimming, and then doing a lot of deep breathing and meditation. And fortunately, as unfortunate as COVID was, in a certain way, it was fortunate for me with that timing while I was kind of spending that year of 2020 really focused on this. Wisdom 2.0 with John Kabat-Zinn did a 13-week kind of mediation every single day. Thousands of people from the globe, would call in. So there was a sense of community. And then there was that sense of serenity and letting go of things that didn't serve me. My steadfast friends and medical team, were really instrumental in helping me get through my emotional roller coaster. So I didn't know if I could stave off kidney failure, but I did it. I had a successful transplant. Within 24 hours of being entered in a paired donor exchange, when you have living donors, but they're not a match, and then you have to kind of find these pairs, I was matched with a kidney from a 30-year-old woman in less than 24 hours. And there were 5 choices, and that was the best one. So they scheduled my operation for 3 weeks. And my world-renowned surgeon, who had started the transplant center there 26 years ago, operated on me on Thursday, February 25th, 2021. And when I left the hospital that Sunday, my function had gone from 11% to normal. It was really extraordinary. So this past July, I visited the academy and Saul again. We drove up the same narrow, dusty road to the jagged cliffs and cactus and got out of the Jeep as the sun was beginning to set. It also coincidentally was the night of the supermoon, that enormous red supermoon, right? So the sky was filled with yellows and pinks, and the sunset seemed to last forever. And there was the sunset, there was like, it was like a half of the top half of an egg. It was like this bright yellow, and it was like literally sitting on this ocean. And so when I looked at each other, and it was like the sun was saying, notice me and farewell, right? So he said goodbye to the sun, to the setting sun. And we turned and waved to the huge red fiery moon. As he held my hands, he felt strong and abundant, positive energy. He looked me in the eyes and said that if I could manifest a kidney from a 30-year-old woman, I could manifest anything. So plant the seeds, take action, and choose. And then he christened me Renovated Anita. And P.S., the shaman was also the construction manager. He built like the whole modern Elder Academy campus. And he would put like, in this new building, he put like shalom on the bottom and, you know, from everything you could possibly imagine. So that's the Renovated Anita kind of had a couple of different meanings. So there were lessons that I learned that will benefit me for the rest of my life. And you might find that you've done these in your challenges as well. So I'm confident because I know that when I faced challenges in the past, I surmounted them and I can do it again. Achieving the impossible is possible with persistence, resourcefulness, and what I call smart doses of reality. Don't be deterred, be knowledgeable, advocate, and use your voice. And uncertainty is unsettling. And as I discovered, it doesn't matter how it arrives, good news or bad news, but focus on what you can do and not on what you can't. Social connection, engagement, and the support of people who care matter a lot. Create space for your emotions, which certainly meditation is really great for. Let stuff go. Unencumbered produces much better results. And last but not least, the awareness, self-care, and discipline are really critical to your well-being. So now my third act is unfolding. I'm reconnecting with all of these things and pulling all of these threads. And I'm very excited and certain that it's going to be a great ride.
Thank you, Anita. Your strength, your amazing resilience and perseverance, but mostly I just want to underline a trust you had and still have in yourself and in the world for you. And so I'm really curious to learn a little more about what you're exploring now that you're, you know, you're healthy and you've said goodbye to the supermoon and on to your next chapter. So tell me what you're exploring.
Okay, so we were talking about these kind of threads, you know, that I found. What I really love to do is lead conversation. And I always wanted to be the next Barbara Walters because I love interviewing. I'm, you know, highly curious and all of that. And it's explaining about, you know, Prodigy, you know, as well, that whole idea of kind of a holistic way of like systems thinking, right? And design thinking, you know, in that, and what's the big picture and what are the small pictures and how does everything interrelate? So I'm looking at this conversation that I've used in partnerships, right? In business development and strategy, all of those different kinds of things. And so one of the things I'm doing is doing more facilitation and interviews and leading conversations. And then I'm kind of letting myself flow, kind of like what Saul said about planting the seeds, you know, and seeing what grows. The workshop there, when I went in July, unbeknownst to me, aligned exactly with what I was going there for. And it was all around creative collaboration and learning those tools. So that's what I'm exploring now. Different ways to do it, what the process is. And I'm learning, the marketing consulting that I did, where we would do brainstorming and come up with different ideas and assess them and do the interviews and come back. That's a thread, in that process, as well. And inviting different opinions, right? And helping to steer things. So, so I'm looking at those kinds of things. And I think that one of the areas I'm exploring, so there's one thing about the process and then there's the application of it, right? So one thing I'm looking at is climate change. And there are lots of different, things in that, right? It could be around the food system. It could be around, regenerative soil, talking and seeing what appears.
So I'm not sure if it's on my end, but I lost a little bit of what you said in the end. Do you mind just repeating that last? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. It's talking about the application, right?
Yes.
Like how do I want to turn it, right? And so I love innovation and technology, and there's so many new businesses that are coming up and attention giving to things around climate change and all of these various dimensions. So that's one of the things that I'm looking at. I'm learning more about that. I speak with Paul Hawken, those kinds of people to help me. But it's basically, as I said, it's kind of the flow, and it's, oh, here's an interesting stone. Let me explore that and see where that takes me.
Well, I appreciate that your passion is focused on such an important way that you can make an impact in this beautiful life. So thank you for your story tonight and for sharing with us. I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to say you should check out the chat. You had all sorts of wonderful reactions and thoughts about your beautiful talk. So thank you. So
Diana, I just want to remember to say, so maybe you'll put this in the email when you send it out. But one of the things about going through an experience like this, and I know that all of you who have had health condition or something have contributed back in some way. So I've written articles that I posted on Medium. There are 9 total. 7 of them are about my kidney journey, and then 2 are about the diet. And the intention there is to help other people. So I'd love if you can read them, or if you know people who are dealing with something like this, to let them know about it.
We will definitely put that in follow-up emails about your Medium articles. Thank you so much for everything you're doing and will do. All right, so next, our final storyteller for this evening is the wonderful Michelle Fishburne. Her third act bumper sticker philosophy is please move my cheese. And boy, has your cheese been moved a lot these days, my dear, for those of you that recall that book. So I'll start quickly by giving a little quick background and then let Michelle take it away from there. So Michelle lost her job in the COVID spring, but she did something no one else did. She drove 12,000 miles all over the United States from September of 2020 to September of 2021, interviewing people about their lives during the pandemic. Now, resulting from this journey is a book called Who We Are Now, 101 Stories of What Americans Lost and Found during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's being published by the UNC Press, coming out in March. I do happen to know that it is on pre-order on Amazon. And while you're talking, I'm going to try to load that link in the chat. But welcome. I know you've had, as a nomad in continuing your journeys, you've had a really challenging time with the hurricane and your parents. So thank you for taking the time and being here tonight.
Well, thank you, Diana. And I just want to start with, okay, we're going to do a little bit of a raise of hands. Try to think back to when you were graduating from high school. So do you have that in your mind? Okay. How many of you felt like you were pretty certain how your life was going to turn out? Oh, so we have some wise ones already. Okay, I was one of the dummies. And I thought I already knew I was going to go off to college, UNC. I was going to go to law school. I was going to become a lawyer. I would have some kids. I would get married. Well, get married, have some kids. And that was going to be my life, and everything was going to work out just fine. And life doesn't really go that way. And so even right before I get into the story right now, so how many of you have your bedroom, bedroom and your kitchen and your bathroom and your shower behind you in your screen tonight? Raise your hand. Okay, that's my bed. I'm living my motorhome full time. Now, if I had been told when I graduated from UVA Law School that at 59 years old, I'd be living full time in my motorhome, I would have laughed at you. No, I'm going to a big law firm. Everything's going to be fine. No, I live in my motorhome. Now, certainty is never certain. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? We've just touched on that a little bit. Anita did. And so right now, my motorhome is parked in a hospital parking lot. And this is where I have spent the last 3 nights of my life, is living in this parking lot. But it's about my third act. My first act was I was part of a loving family, and my dad is beloved. And this is a culmination of all 3 acts. My second act was I was a homeschool mom. And I really loved watching my kids and trying to pique their interest. And when they were uncomfortable or they weren't feeling well, to figure out a way to help them get through it, as like a bumpers like you have on a bowling alley. My third act is that I've now embraced uncertainty, and I kind of go with the flow. So when Hurricane Ian was headed toward Fort Myers, I got in my motorhome and I drove from North Carolina to Fort Myers. My parents are indeed now unhoused, and my father broke his hip 2 days ago or 3 days ago, and just had hip surgery. But, and this is what's amazing about life, is that sometimes, and I would say almost all the time, when something adverse happens and you lean into it and you go with it, there's this other thing that happens too. Just Anita's nodding her head. A lot of people are nodding their heads, right? That's how we are wiser for our lives. So because I live in a motorhome, number one, I could go rescue my parents. Number two, when my dad was kept trying to get up from his bed in the middle of the night with a new hip, the nurses could call me and say, can you just come in? Because you're just sleeping like right around the corner from us. And so I'm here and I'm able to be a support. A lot of women our age get caught in that sandwich situation where we want to pursue our own lives, but we're also still taking care of adult children or want to be near them. And we have our beloved parents who we also want to be there for. And because we have a brick and mortar job, usually in the past, and a brick and mortar house, we can't be workers. I'm a remote worker. I work 30 hours a week for a global pharmaceutical consulting company. We have to be our workers in one place, and we have to say to our parents, I'm sorry, I really can't take time off, or to the, we're like torn, that previous era being torn all the time. And so one of the joyful things about my cheese having been moved in that COVID spring is that I am now able, through my remote nomadic life, to be a good mom, a good daughter, a good worker, and I get to be a joyful creative with this new unexpectedly found chapter, which I will now dive into. But I just wanted to say that this is like, it's so, and I was going to prepare lovely remarks, certainty, right? I was certain that on October 21st, I would have this all laid out, and I know exactly what I was going to tell you guys. I'm actually doing this on the fly, as you can probably tell, because life didn't turn out that way. And so maybe there's a little bit of a message in that, but I'll just quickly jump back into why we're here. Why does my bumper sticker say, please move my cheese? Because what I have found is that every time my cheese has moved, I have found a new version of myself. And so just quickly to reiterate about that book, it's called Who Moved My Cheese? It's very short. Actually, I have a copy. I should have brought it with me. It's very short. It came out in the 90s. And basically it says there are these two mice, and every day they go running through the maze to the same room and they get their cheese. And because they've done this day after day, so many days, they know exactly the way to get to that room, and they know exactly what the cheese is going to taste like. And every day is certain. And then one day they get to the little room and there's no cheese. And we'll call them Fred and Joe. So Fred and Joe say, what happened to the cheese? The next day they get back there, no cheese. The next day they get back there, no cheese. Fred says, you know, man, Joe, I don't think this cheese is coming back. And Joe said, no, it is coming back. It's coming back. And Fred said, well, you know what? I'm going to go out and I'm going to wander through the maze and I'm going to go find another cheese. It may not be the same cheese. In fact, it's probably not going to be. It'll taste a little bit different, but it'll be cheese nonetheless, and I'm going to go find it. And Joe said, okay, well, I'm just going to sit here and wait. So that's what the book Who Moved My Cheese is about. You don't need to read the whole thing because you basically, that's the lesson. You get it, right? What happened to me very quickly, as Diana said, is I lost my job in the COVID spring. I submitted 86 customized cover letters between the middle of March and the middle of July at the age of 57. And I had nothing, like a big goose egg, zero. On July 31st, the lease on my post-divorce house was up. And my youngest was going off to college. So there I was in a Target parking lot on July 15. And sometimes you all know this. It's those simple, pragmatic decisions that you have to make that set other things into motion. So I literally sat in this Target parking lot and said to myself out loud, so Michelle, you have to call the movers and you have to tell them where they're taking your stuff. Now, I didn't know where I was going to find another job. Like I had offered to work for half of my salary, even more than half my, less than half, like I had offered myself as an intern at 57 with a law degree and everything. And nobody would take me. Nobody would take me at all. So I thought, well, I can't like get rent an apartment, because what happens if I have to go move halfway across the country to get a job? So I sat there and I thought, that's kind of crazy. Well, I said, well, I've got this motor home. I homeschooled my kids in this motor home for once for 10 months and once for 4 months. And I thought, okay, I have the motor home and I know how to drive it all over the United States. And I know how to do PR because that's what I do. And I thought, well, I'll just take the motor home though to a beach and I'll just sit there and try to consult my way to a new job. But that's what I had already proved to myself was going to fail. That's what everybody else was trying to do. And when people have said to me, you were so brave to do what you did, I'm like, no. I did it because I was terrified of being at a beautiful beach day after day after day and waking up and struggling to try to get something that I didn't know if was ever going to come. Like to me, that would have been staying in that same little room with Joe. The cheese will come, right? So I thought, okay, I'll just go out in the maze. And so I thought, okay, Humans of New York. I'll put together a project that's like Humans of New York. I'll interview people all across the country in the pandemic. I'll put together like an Instagram account, a website, maybe somebody in the press will be interested. And then at Christmas time, I'll have a whole project and I'll say to people, see, I'm worthy of you paying me to do a job. Even if it's a pittance, I'm worthy. Please hire me. And that was the only goal, really. But then I got out there and I started doing this, and it was hard at first, and that's really fun too. And somebody said to me, by the time I got to October, I was talking to a Lions Club in Henrietta, Oklahoma, if you must know. And the woman said to me, "This is a book, right?" And I said, "No." And then people started saying to me, "It's a book. This is history. These are oral histories of something that is huge." And I said, "No, it's not a book. I'm not an author." But at Christmas time, I sent one email to UNC Press and I said, "Is this a book?" They said, "As a matter of fact, it is." But I'm still don't consider myself an author because I didn't write any of the stories That's the beauty of this. It's 100 people writing their own stories. They're all between like 400 and 1200 words. Okay. So what does this have to do with the third act quest? And what does this have to do with Please Move My Cheese? But for COVID, I would still be in Chapel Hill in a comfortable house, working for the same job. And that would have been sad. And sometimes when our cheese is moved, we get this beautiful opportunity, even though sometimes it's painful, to see a different version of ourselves. And I know that, and Diana's like, please do the kaleidoscope thing, please do the kaleidoscope thing, right? So what I learned is this. Remember kaleidoscopes? Did you have a kaleidoscope? Okay, so I see nods. So a kaleidoscope, when it's made, it has a certain number of different color pieces of glass or whatever at the end, right? And that's how it is. And it's self-contained, and you don't put new stuff in it. That's just what it is. And every time you change the little knob, the pattern you see is slightly different. But everything in it is all the same. It's just kind of rearranged in a different, beautiful way. And if we don't change that knob, then we don't get to see those new versions. And when we're comfortable, it's hard to force ourselves to be uncomfortable. And so the reason why my motto was please move my cheese is because I know myself well enough. If I have a comfy pair of, slippers, I'm going to have them for a long time. And so my motto is please move my cheese, because I want things to happen in my life that make me uncertain, that's put me off balance, that challenge me, that sometimes bring me to my knees, because this one beautiful life, as Diana likes to say, this one beautiful life, I want to get to know myself, like the different versions of myself. And I hope my third act quest is my fourth and my fifth and my sixth, and that my cheese keeps being moved, so I get to just continue to see who I am. And that's it. Oh, I forgot to say about my book. Oh,
Well, actually, Elizabeth just put it in the chat also for people to link over.
Okay, and there it is up on the gallery. So there are Buddy, my Shih Tzu, and I. And by the way, while my father was in the hospital, Buddy got sick. So 3 hours at the vet yesterday and 2 hours the day before. So he's okay though. So Buddy and I took this 12,000-mile journey, and the book is called Who We Are Now: Stories of What Americans Lost and Found During the COVID-19 Pandemic. And that image on the front is actually the Los Angeles freeway with not a single car on it during 2020.
Wow.
That's not my image. That's one that was purchased. But I do. I mean, so that's the book. Yes. And it's on pre-sale on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all. But really what I want to leave you guys with is the kaleidoscope, is just, when something really has you struggling, just say to yourself, oh, I guess I'm gonna get to see another version of me in that kaleidoscope.
Michelle, thank you for taking the time from the parking lot as you care for your dear father, after being made homeless and then falling and breaking his hip. Those things have stacked up to be such a tough time. And thank you for circling us back to where we started at the beginning of the time together tonight with dear Lori, about pivoting to the positive. And it's almost, I didn't design the speaker sequence, but something designed it, because everyone has added to and complemented, and to use the thread analogy again, pulled this thread of positivity, of embracing uncertainty, recognizing that we can pump our little resilience muscles, because we're well trained to do so after being on this planet and living our lives. And then the final image of this beautiful kaleidoscope. So we've gone a little past our time, but if anyone has anything they want to say to Michelle or ask Michelle, please, we'll do it quickly. And then I just have a couple of parting words for you. Well, I'm hearing beautiful.
Oh,
go ahead, go for it.
It's not critical, but when you talked about who moved my cheese, when I was working as a business manager in a role I had sort of segued into out of necessity, was formerly a lawyer, the VP of the company who had been running the company, he said, you know, Karen, you stole my cheese. You put my cheese somewhere else. He told me all about this whole cheese book. And he's like, just read the book, read the cheese book, Karen, and you'll understand what I mean. Who moved my cheese? And so I read the book and I was like, wow, you know, Phil, I think we have to work on like finding your new cheese. And he was like, nope, I can't find my new cheese. I'm going to quit and I'm going to compete with your business. So anyway, he ended up quitting and he ended up being so much happier and I was so much happier. And he actually found his cheese and he became our second biggest customer. That was he did find his cheese, but he had to find it in a totally different room. So I love your conversation about cheese. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Oh my Lord. Well, so just a couple of words. The first are words of great gratitude for you all for sharing your stories. And for those of you that have been with us for 3 hours, I guess, you know, it's just a testimony to how powerful the desire we have for connection and learning from each other. Every single one of your stories has a nugget or 2 or 10 that we can all hold on to as we think about rewriting our third act and evolving this beautiful time of our lives and changing the way we think of aging and help others change the way they look at it as well. So I thank you all. I also want to acknowledge and thank the contributing partners that have been a part of supporting us along the way. I also want to leave you with a quote from a beautiful Mary Oliver poem that for those of you that have known me for a while have probably heard it 2 or 10 or 20 million times. And it bears repeating, and I ask you to think of this as you depart and you click off Zoom tonight. Think of this, not just tonight and not just tomorrow when you're listening to the inspiring stories, but every day in every moment. This is our one wild and precious life. So think about it and tell me and tell yourself what it is that you plan to do with it. Everyone, thank you and have a beautiful night.
Thank you, Diana.
Take your mics off, your mutes off, and wave and say goodbye to each other.
Thank you, Diana.
Bye, Diana.
Thank you.
Bye.
Tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Self-visible.